Hi there berries, welcome to this Lux 2021 support guide. Everything in this video should teach you how to play her. So sit back, relax, and get ready for all the runes, items, abilities, ability skill orders, and any tips and tricks to help you win your solo queue games. Just before we start, just want to shout out my Patreon page, patreon.com/Bizzleberry. There I host coaching sessions, coaching classes, so if you are interested in being taught by me how to play the game better in a semi-private session with other people paying for coaching sessions, then have a look over there. I'll put a link down under below if you are interested in taking part of those classes. I host one of them once per month, and dates are on the Patreon page if you are interested. Moving on into the rune section of the rune page. So on all of these guides that I do, we'll first talk about the runes and then we'll move on to the practice tool. In the practice tool, we'll have a look at the items and abilities, etc. But the first thing you do before you even get into game, when you've locked in Lux, these are the runes that you're going to be picking up. Everything here is pretty standard. Now the Lux that we're going to be building, there are two types of Luxes. There's the AP Lux where you're focusing more on damage, and then you've got the Enchanter Lux where you're focusing more on team utility. I would highly recommend in either build that you use a rune build very similar or exactly like this. I personally would prefer you to do AP Lux in the bot lane. You can still do decent utility with her as the AP variant. I feel like the Enchanter one doesn't quite hit us quite hard. I will still cover the items section for the Enchanter Lux for new Lux players, but I highly urge you to use the AP variant even as a support. So Arcane Comet is very easy to land on Lux. Her two main damaging her abilities are forms of crowd control, so it means Arcane Comet will land on them almost no matter what. Mana Flow Band will help you increase your mana regeneration in the laning phase and throughout the entire game. Transcendence gives you some ability haste, which is more than welcome on Lux to enable you to do more damage, throw out more crowd control, and shield your allies more often. Scorch is an interesting one. It interacts with Arcane Comet, so if your Arcane Comet is just about to come off cooldown and you have hit an enemy recently and it's applied the Scorch debuff, it will then fire out an Arcane Comet, which can increase your DPS in the laning phase. Inspiration, you've got pretty standard runes here. You've got biscuits for further mana regeneration, as Lux does have some mana issues early on in the game, and also gives you a little bit more sustain. And then you've got Cosmic Insight. This will give your flash a lower cooldown, and will give you, if you've got Ignite or Exhaust, depending on what you want in the laning phase, it will reduce the cooldown of that as well. We'll be picking up a Ludens in the main core build, so that will reduce the proc cooldown on Ludens as well by 1 second. So if you take any other items, even in the Enchanter Lux, you can pick up things like Redemption that can reduce the item haste, will reduce the cooldown reduction of those items as well. In the stat runes down below, these are fairly common and standard. However, you could switch out the first one for more haste if you wish. This is completely up to you. I just prefer the extra damage in the laning phase to try and get a sneaky kill in to help further snowball your advantage in the bot lane. But these runes are pretty standard. You could do a variant of a Guardian build, but I wouldn't encourage that even still for new players, as you'll have further mana issues. So I think this build here is perfect balance of DPS and survivability, and enabling you to increase your mana regeneration in the lane. The Guardian build, as I mentioned, will reduce your mana regeneration quite a lot, so you won't be able to harass as much or do as much damage in the laning phase. And Lux's primary job in the bot lane at the start of the game is to harass her opponents as much as possible. If you do decide to do Enchanter Lux, it could end up doing a Guardian build anyway, which could end up looking something like this, where it's Guardian, and then you've got something like a Font of Life to help apply the debuff. The healer itself and Font of Life won't do too much, but it's better than nothing. Bone Plating just to give yourself a bit of extra protection, and Revitalize will buff up the shield that Lux provides, also buffs the Guardian shield as well. And then on the Inspiration, you've got the exact same ones there as well, with the biscuits and the Cosmic Insight. And once again, you can tweak the haste or the Adaptive Force, but once again, I do not recommend this rune build in general, but if you are doing Enchanter Lux, this could be a more favorable build if you're going up against a hard engaged support such as a Leona, Thresh, Blitzcrank, just to give you some more survivability in the lane. Now we're going to move into the practice tool. So let me just head over to the practice tool and lock in Lux. So Lux, most people starting out playing League, Lux ends up being one of their first champions being played. She's a core kind of staple pick, not only for the support role but also for the mid lane role, for especially easy to understand for new players into League. So if you are a new support player, Lux is a very good baseline to start, particularly if you've already played her mid. She does pretty well in those roles. So moving into game here. What we're going to do here is we're going to level up to 4. Give ourselves all cooldown reduction, etc. And we're going to spawn some dummies in. Very similar to the kind of teammates that you probably have in your games. Right. First we'll talk about the abilities that we have. I'm going to talk about the passive a little bit later on. We're going to jump straight into her Q. So Lux's Q is a binding. Single projectile, moves quite slow, so if they're at the end of the cast, you can have plenty of time to move out of it. But the cool thing with the binding is that it can actually affect the first 2 targets. So here, you've got the first target being affected by the binding, but it can hit 2 targets. So this is particularly neat, as most skill shots like this in League only hit 1 target, and then, you know, if you're standing behind a minion, you're protected. However, if you're, say for example, this front dummy here is a caster minion in a caster minion wave, and the enemy champion is standing behind them, you can easily just bind the enemy champion standing behind them just by throwing out the binding onto the caster minion. And it catches out a lot of people, especially in the lower ELOs. They think they're safe by standing behind the minion pack, and then, you know, actually you can crowd control them through that, so that's really nice. You can use that in tangent with your E. So your E is this orb that flies out of you, and anyone standing in that circle, enemy team-wise, gets slowed. So if they're in that zone there, the enemy gets slowed, and then you can choose to let it detonate by itself, or you can press E again to detonate it early. Now, because of the slow effect on this, you can use this to help land your bindings more easily. So now this front target is slowed. It can easily set you up for that binding setup. So you could 2 things you can do during this is, you know, slow this slowed, and then you throw your binding out. Chances are you probably will land. You can leave this on the ground as well a little bit longer to help reposition. You can get nearer your target as well if you want to, which increases the chance that your binding will land again, as you're reducing the distance between you and the enemy. It gives them the less reaction chance to dodge. But also another effect of this as well is that there's a really good just crowd control that you can leave on the ground. There's a few things that you can also bait out of this as well. So if Siva's spell shield, she might pop that when you do that on the ground, but if you actually delay the pop-off effect of that, you can make it so that she pops her spell shield, then it goes down, and then it's still on the ground, and you can still damage her with the ability. So that's a really nice little cool trick there against Sivers. But in general, you can just leave this on the ground. If you land it right in the center like this, unless you're against a champion that like Ezreal or someone who has a dash that can easily get out of it quickly, you can leave it on the ground for as long as you like. And as soon as you use this ability, the cooldown in the background starts ticking off. So, you know, as soon as we throw this out, the internal cooldown is already ticking off, even though, you know, it's still out there on the field. So there is no punishment for leaving it out on the ground. You don't have to immediately pop this. And this can be really annoying anyway for the enemy team, having to like spend a lot of time moving out of it. So say if you land it directly on the middle of an AD carry trying to last hit, they want to get out of this circle. So they're going to be spending a second or two just trying to get out of that circle, Rather than, you know, you just instantly detonating on them, the damage is dealt and then they don't have to worry about it. So leaving the E on the ground is a very good tool throughout, not just throughout the laning phase, but also in some team fights as well. Just the slow effect can just be huge as well in terms of helping you getting away from the enemy. And when the destination effect does happen, they're also slowed for an additional 1 second. So it's just lots of slows just from that one ability. Your W now is your utility tool. It's a shield that shields on its way out. And as it comes back in, it does another shield. So 2 shields in 1 ability. This affects allies as well. And you can sort of reposition this one out on the way back out as well. So if we do shield out, we can bend it around a little bit just to hit another target that we may have missed. So this is something that you should just be pressing anyway, just to keep someone alive, or at the, you know, at any point really during a team fight, aiming the shield on as many allies as possible just to cover as many people as possible to give them the shield buff. Now we're going to be talking about the passive. We did skip over that at the very start, and that's a good reason for that, because your Q, E, and R abilities, your damaging abilities, apply the passive. So whenever you do a Q, for example, both targets here have this glowing effect, and this is your passive. So if you do an auto attack, you can detonate that passive. So you do auto attack plus passive damage to basically do extra damage in the laning phase. So you get rewarded for doing an auto attack on top of the ability. So it does encourage you to get closer in range to the enemy, but sometimes this can be a really powerful trade tool. There is no cooldown on this either, so you can also, you know, refresh it. So you detonate your damage with your E. You've also got 2 little debuffs here also to detonate. Your ultimate utilizes this passive really, really nicely. So your ultimate is a laser that comes out of you. It's on a relatively short cooldown as well. But the core thing with the interaction with your ultimate and your passive is that it detonates any passive stacks that are on the target and also reapplies. So if, say for example, these 2 enemies here don't have a passive stack, if you do your ultimate, then they'll have passive stacks that you can remove. If you double bind these 2 targets here and you do your ultimate, it will not only detonate the passives but also reapply a new one for you to pop off as well with your auto attacks if you're able to. So you can get extra damage by making sure that you've already got passive stacks from your Q or your E before landing your ultimate. So the classic combo is binding into instant ult. That's the fastest way to dish out as much damage as possible. You can weave your E into this as well. So if you do, for example, QER, and you can leave your E lingering on the ground as well. And then you can also then just whack off some auto attacks. The main reason why you might not necessarily want to detonate your E very quickly is because you might still need that slow effect to help chase up on them to finish them off. Particularly if these targets here are tanky targets, they're not going to die from your combo. But if they are squishy targets, you can actually detonate your E as your ult cast is going out. So you can do QE ulti, and as it lands, you can, as the ultimate lands, you can also press your E button to detonate the E as well. So it gives them much. That the burst is so fast and so tight that there's no window to be able to use a summon heal through that effect, if that makes sense. So QE and then ultimate, and then as the E and the ultimate come down, you can detonate them both at the same time. So yeah, that's like the main huge damaging combo of Lux. In terms of skill order, you're going to want to be maxing your E first. If you are playing Enchanter Lux, you might only want to put 3 points in your E and then max your W. But if you're playing the DPS Lux that I recommend you do, the AP Lux, you're going to be maxing your E first. Good extra damage from this, and also the slow is also increased per point. And then you're going to want to max your W second, as the shield value for your team. It is nice. It ramps up at the moment. It's on 20 per instance of shield, so it's basically an extra 40 shield. But then you can obviously like multiply that by how many teammates you have nearby. So if you do have 4 or 5 teammates nearby, the extra 20 on that shield easily becomes into 40 per person, because if you hit everyone on the way back out as well, so then 40 times 5 is 200. So effectively 200 extra shield value per point on the W if you do land perfect shields. Obviously you're not going to land perfect shields no matter how good you are all the time, but you know, it gives you a kind of a indication, like, you know, how strong per point the W can potentially be. Putting points in Q isn't particularly great. It does reduce the cooldown of the Q by 0.5 per point, but honestly it's just not worth it. The damage value as well goes up an okay amount as well, but the shield is just, as I mentioned before, is just more valuable in my opinion. Now talking about items now, going into the laning phase, you're always going to want to start, no matter what you're doing, is a Spell Thief's Edge start with the 2 health potions. You don't want to go Relic Shield because you need the mana regen coming through. Like as we mentioned in the rune section, Lux has some mana issues at the very start of lane that you're going to need to solve. Now there are 2 variants of AP Lux that I want to talk you through. So you have the expensive build and then you have the poor build. So if you're doing at least okay in lane, I'd advise you to do the main AP build. Generally you'll be going into Sorcerer's Shoes. You'll be starting off at least with the boots one, because you need the movement speed in lane, not only to catch people out with skill shots but also dodge them yourself. But you could easily lead into Lost Chapter if you're still having mana issues with those runes, and then dip into Sorcerer's Shoes. Or you could do Sorcerer's Shoes outright first before putting any money value into the Ludens. But the main AP build is revolved around Luden's Tempest. The poor build involves Imperial Mandate. Now Imperial Mandate is much cheaper than the Ludens, but will give you much less damage throughout the game. This is an item, say if you're going 0-2, 0-3 in lane, you have 0 kills but 3 deaths. And honestly, you're not going to be that useful in going into the mid game. Imperial Mandate is the best way for you to get the most bang for your buck at that point. So Imperial Mandate is, you know, it applies the debuff on slows. So what you do is, even just your E slow will do the initial detonation. So you can see that red flashing that's happening there, and that is the Imperial Mandate item being applied. So what you need there is you need an ally to detonate that red mark to get the bonus damage. So you're always relying on an ally to follow up with the damage, but the damage can be worth it. And also both of you get a movement speed boost as well if an ally does detonate those marks. So Imperial Mandate overall is okay. It's just the overall, the Ludens in terms of self-carry in solo queue, Ludens is much better. Very similar to maybe like the Zyra or Bran builds if you have seen those guides that I have made. Ludens is very good on these champions that do hit multiple champions at the same time. But let's assume you're having a relatively okay lane, you're going into Ludens here, and now you're basically at this point only able to choose 1 extra item because of the Ludens expense. So in a normal game, Ludens plus 1 other item is generally your core build. Horizon Focus is pretty good. This is a really good ability because it does extra damage to the non-targeted abilities, and if you're immobilizing them, it also reveals them for your team, which you don't particularly need, as the E and the ultimate do give vision of the targets when you're doing those abilities. So the reveal function of Horizon Focus isn't particularly amazing, but it will mean that you do extra damage to the target. Another favorite is Cosmic Drive as well. Cosmic Drive gives you, with the Ludens, you have enough ability power to get the Spell Dance proc through, which gives you even more ability haste. So you're stacking up 40 ability haste just with this item. You're getting some extra movement speed as well, and give you some great utility throughout the game as well. So with the Ludens, with the Cosmic Drive, with only a Spell Feast. We haven't upgraded the Spell Feast because we haven't hit champions in the laning phase yet. But with that, we're on 181 ability power, which is more than enough to get you that Spell Dance extra ability haste through. So if you feel like you want more cooldown reduction to be able to land more Qs, more Es, throw out more shields, maybe have your ultimate on a little bit lower cooldown, then that is a very good option as well. So Horizon Focus for more raw damage, and Cosmic Drive for a little bit more team utility. If you are worried about assassins, Zhonya's is a good option as well. The stasis effect can help protect you from assassins and buy your team a little bit of time. But being able to pick that up as a third item is going to be extremely unlikely, and the game will probably end up being a 40-minute game. But if you've already got a Cosmic Drive and Illudens, the stopwatch alone, just getting able to use this one once in a big team fight can prove incredibly handy for your team. And you know, if you manage to get into Zhonya's and you manage to get into full complete build here, then a Ward Stone, instead of having the control wards taking up a slot, you've got a Ward Stone here that takes the slot for you, and as you plant more wards, this will automatically upgrade to the 25 ability haste, and you can choose to buy the Vigilant Ward Stone if the game's still going on after a really long time. You can still opt in to get that. In a second, we're going to talk about the Enchanter build. One last item that you might be considering to take is the Morellonomicon on Lux. I would highly urge against this. If the enemy team has a lot of grievous wounds needed, debuffs, so if they're healing for a lot, then I would actually recommend Chemtech Putrefier. Now the reason behind this is because if you complete this item here, whenever you shield an ally, the next damage ability that you and your ally do, it will apply the 60% grievous wounds. And now, you know, Lux and shield up to, you know, her entire team, so that could be multiple grievous wound stacks going down at the same time. Whereas Morello, the stats on it aren't as nice in my opinion as the Chemtech. The Chemtech, if we can find it again, I sell it. The Chemtech is 200 gold cheaper, so you are saving out on some money. You do have about 25 less AP, but you have increased mana regen and you have ability haste. So you're losing 25 AP for a lot of cooldown reduction and a lot of mana regeneration. And honestly, the build path for Chemtech Putrefier is much nicer as well than Morello. You have this Oblivion Orb and then a Blasting Wand, and then you kind of stuck around for 850 gold to complete this item through. Whereas with the Chemtech, you have the Oblivion Orb, but you have these nicer, softer components to build into the Bound of Glass to give you that haste before you then have this fully completed item through. So the build path as well is more generous. So as long as you're having those team fights, the Chemtech is going to be overall better for you and your team, in my opinion. If you're up against a lot of team as well that has a lot of magic resistance as well, you could potentially opt into a Void Staff as well for a second item. It will give you a lot of extra damage through that you will need, because if you have it, the Ludens, and if there's like 2-3 tanks on an enemy team, you might actually need that Void Staff second item in order to actually do any damage in the first place, which means, you know, it's going to be longer for you to get the Cosmic Drive or the Horizon Focus. I think at this point, if you had to go Void Staff to mitigate the enemy's magic resistance, I'd probably would look into either the Cosmic Drive or the Chemtech Putrefier. Just to give you more utility in the fights and things like that, because you probably won't get that much benefit with more AP with the Horizon Focus. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to build the AP Lux. There's a few items that you might need to juggle around, you know, with the Void Staff if they've got magic resistance, but you're always looking to try and get the Ludens in first. If you have to go the Imperial Mandate, the secondary items are completely the same. So if you're having to go Imperial Mandate, you're probably generally looking more towards a utility-esque build, so you're not going to be really going Horizon Focus, but the Cosmic Drive and the Chemtech are decent options as well. If you do Cosmic Drive with the Imperial Mandate, you're on 156 AP at the moment with the Spell Thief base, but you will have this upgraded, so you will actually get enough AP in order to get the Cosmic Drive buff. So you could do Imperial Mandate and Cosmic Drive to get the Spell Dance buff. That will totally work as well. Or you could go full utility. You could do Imperial Mandate with the Chemtech Putrefier. That's fine. And then, you know, this is very similar to almost to the Enchanter Lux build that you can do now with an Imperial Mandate. You could do Imperial Mandate, Chemtech, Putrefier, and then a good item I like to do is an Ardent at the moment with this, because you're shielding loads of people up to give them that boost through. So they're gonna, a lot of your teammates are going to be getting the extra auto attack speed, which can help. You know, if you've got a lot of auto attacking champions on the team, it can be noticeable. And you know, all of these items are generally pretty cheap, so you know, even if you're having to maybe veer off the AP path and go into a more utility build, you can always stick with the Arcane Comet Rune build path and then go into the Enchanter Lux. You can kind of do that. It's not as effective and you won't have as much solo carry potential, whereas if you did the Ludens build, but this is a valid option. This is like, okay, I'm not going to be doing as much damage this game, I can still be useful to my team in other ways, and this is the way to veer off and do that. So you might need to keep a little post-it note of the items next to your computer, just because there are a lot of items here going on both builds, and you can play either build with the same runes as well, so you are thinking a little bit more than usual in terms of what items to take in what scenario. But hopefully this gives you an idea of what you should be kind of building item wise in your games. So just a absolute final recap: AP Lux, Ludens, my preference would be Cosmic Drive, and then going into finally maybe like a Void Staff or Grievous Wounds with the Chemtech. So let's just say Void Staff, let's just say I'm doing really well. Like the items I have here are very, very good in terms of solo carry potential as a support. They're very similar to kind of like a mid lane Lux build. If you're playing Enchanter Lux, or you're doing like a poor man's Lux build, you can do Imperial Mandate. If you've identified that hopefully early enough that you're not going to be doing very well in the game. And then you're moving into like a Chemtech Putrefier with an Ardent Sensor. If you are doing Enchanter Lux, you don't have to do Imperial Mandate. Let's say you are determined that, you know, Imperial Mandate, I want to play Enchanter Lux, but I don't want to do an Imperial Mandate. The other two support options, the Shuridias or even the Moonstone, are very good options as well. Honestly, at this point, it comes down more to personal preference. I would probably urge more towards the Shuridias, because if you are shielding your entire team, Shuridias' passive is when you give a beneficial effect to a teammate, it gives them increased movement speed. So you can imagine, like, you know, shielding your entire team once again and giving them bonus movement speed is going to be super nice, along with everything else that you have. Moonstone would give you more shield power and give you a little bit more healing. But overall, I think the Shuridias, with the changes as well, the Shuridias has ability haste as well every time you complete a legendary item, so you're going to have much more cooldown reduction. And with a build like this, you're going to have roughly around about 40% cooldown reduction once you've got your main, you know, support item completed and things as well. So this is a really strong, you know, kind of like Enchanter variation of Lux. I just prefer the AP one. Enchanter Lux, you can totally do it in your games. You know, test out both, give each, you know, build a few games each and just see what you kind of like get the most out of. But you know, I prefer AP. I like the big damages and solo carrying, making those big picks off and doing those combos where it's like, you know, you caught someone out and you're zapping them down for a bajillion damage, especially on those squishy targets. You can still do okay damage with the Enchanter build with these items, but you can't expect to one-shot like the enemy Janna or the enemy like squishy supports or squishy potentially mid laners and things. That won't happen. You can get them low, but I think the pick potential of the AP makes all the difference. So if you kill one person on the enemy team late game, it can easily be the end of the game, and you can get that Baron down or push down in for the enemy Nexus. So you do what's best and most comfortable for you. I hope this guide has helped you out. If you are interested in those coaching classes, again, patreon.com/Bizzleberry. I'll put a link down below for you to have a look at if you wish. I've got lots of other support guides on the channel as well, not just covering enchanters and mages, but also tanks. We recently did a Nautilus guide as well that you can have a look at. And I'll be updating all my 2020 guides to the latest version for you, just to make sure, particularly on the item section, that everything is up to date for you so you can carry on gaining LP in your solo queue games. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. Or if you want a quicker answer, I'm usually streaming at twitch.tv/Bizzleberry. Once again, links to my stream down below. You can ask me questions live regarding to not just Deluxe, but for any other support or LOL query that you have, and I'll be more than happy to help you and assist you. Or if I'm not streaming and you want to reply as well, discord.gg/Bizzleberry. We have over 2,500 support players there hanging out, helping each other out, get better at League. So if you want to take part in the Discord community as well, have a look at that. Once again, links down below if you wish to join the Discord community. Once again, I hope this guide helps you out. I hope this puts you on the right path on becoming a professional Lux player. And good luck in your games. All the best, and feel free, as I said, to check out any other guides on the channel if you do wish to play anything else after you are done with Lux, or if you're done with Lux. I hope you don't end up like a Lux one-trick pony. That would be very naughty. Alright, take care.